You're listening to the Turnaround Podcast, the true life basketball story of Bull City's own Stewart Squirt Holley.
Yo, man, this beat crazy.
Fayetteville Flight gave me that stability all over again. It wasn't no more worrying about if I was going to make the team, if I was on the team or not. You know what I'm saying? I was actually on the team. And something upstairs in my mind clicked. My basketball mindset had came alive again. And the only thing that tainted that Fayetteville Flight experience is that the finances and revenues wasn't where it needed to be. And that is probably the first and only team that I ever had financial issues with. I don't know if money was being mishandled, any of those things. Those were some internal things coming from the ownership. But as players, we suffered because we wasn't receiving our pay on time and those type of things, and we had responsibilities. You sign contracts, you know what I'm saying, being acquired as a professional basketball player, and this particular team acquired my skill set, and we're not being paid for that job. It can get frustrating too. But other than that, I was very appreciative of the opportunity, and I actually wanted to quit. That's probably the first team that I ever played for that I actually wanted to quit. Like, I never thought about quitting no basketball team before that I was ever a team member. But the Fayetteville Flight was the first team that I ever thought about quitting. And it's only because, like I said, first of all, finances weren't coming in. We had a pretty good fan base. The community was supporting the team. People were coming out. We had cheerleaders, we had dancers, and the team, we was pretty good, but we should have been a lot better than what we were. What hindered the Fayetteville Flight was we had a few pieces that didn't fit, and not to throw those particular people under the bus, but we just had a few people that didn't fit. Half of them were players, and no disrespect to the coaching staff, but the coaching staff also. And I found out why, but my dad told me not to quit because I expressed my frustration to my dad, and he told me not to quit. So that was the only reason why I remained with the Fayetteville Flight. And my mentor, Chucky Brown, like I said probably earlier before, but Chucky is not just NBA champion, but Chucky Brown is also, I think he's tied for like having played for the most teams in the NBA. So you name a team, Chucky done played for him. And at the time he was tired, he was scouting for the New Orleans Hornets. So just as a friend and a mentor, he used to come to our games, our home games, and support me. And I talked to him about my frustration, and he said the same thing my dad said, even though they worded things differently, but they both basically was telling me, don't quit. You started it, finish it. And so I wanted to quit, not because the financial situation, but it's because there was some unprofessionalism. And it just reminded me of playing at the community college, because you got a coach that got their favorite players, and it's like, you know, you work extremely hard at what you do, and my gifts are special gifts, and they're a blessing to any team that I'm a member of. I contribute, in other words, to what I'm saying. And so I basically was relieving our two guards who shouldn't have been in a starting role in the first place, but only because his mom was the head coach. This guy was the starting two guard. And ain't a ball player tell you, man, like, none of us like coaches who has favoritism. That's the perfect way to alienate your basketball team. And now that I'm retired and I'm the coach of myself, that's something I don't do. I don't play favoritism. I don't play those type of a game with my players. I don't do that. So, and we actually had a guy on the team named Mylon, which is a close friend of mine, my good homeboy. Mylon had actually played for the Knicks, and he actually played for the 76ers and found himself in the ABA. The thing is to go from the ABA into the NBA, not vice versa. And we played the same position. So we had a lot of battles in practice. And this is an NBA dude, you know what I'm saying? So now he's been acquired on our team, and we're in the same position. So I get to go up against this guy in practice. So just talking with him, I'm like, because he was also relieving. So I asked Mylon, I said, yo, bro, I said, how does it make you feel coming off the bench behind, man? He looked me in my eyes and he was like, man, Squirt Cat Daddy, man, it's just a pit stop for me. And I said, you know what? My level of respect, you know what I'm saying? Because here I am, just fresh from international play as a starting two guard. And I'm finding myself relieving amateur. Now, if this guy would have been better than me, then I could accept coming off the bench behind him. He was actually an okay ball player to not have played organized. So find out half of our team was some guys that the owner knew from the Fayetteville community. Some of these guys, if they even play high school basketball, these guys sit on the bench. You know, but that doesn't mean they can't develop into a great player someday. But that wasn't the case at the Fayetteville Flight. Again, half these guys was on the team because the owner was a local guy, coaching staff was, you know, some local people, and they didn't have their finances together. So those of us, we signed contracts. So that's why that was like a frustrating experience. But also, as far as the basketball aspect of it goes, we should have done a lot better than what we did. I don't really remember our record, but we lost a lot of games. We made the playoffs. I don't know how, but we made the playoffs, lost in the first round, but that's still an experience that you can't buy to actually go in a regional American Basketball Association playoff. We lost in the first round to a team out of Mississippi, and they were stronger, they was better, they were smarter. Coaching staff was a lot better than ours, and everything just showed. So we went home in the first round, but it still was an experience. Our practices would be like war because the team was a divided team, the Fayetteville Flight. Okay, some of us, we've actually played college basketball. We played international basketball. Then you got, you know, this guy that played in the NBA. So we saw the favoritism that the coach had, and I wasn't the only person on the team that was, like, frustrated that, okay, these guys, we even had one guy on the team who lied about his accolades. I exposed him for that. What I mean real quick was, we was like, yo, man, where these dudes come from? We sitting here criticizing some of our teammates. So we like, yeah, man, where they get these guys from? And so this one dude named Darryl, I do not remember his last name. He was a super cornball. He actually lied about his accolades, saying that he had, after playing at one of them high schools in Fayetteville, and he went to the Air Force, played in the Air Force, then played for Campbell University. So I said, oh, yes. I said, who was you at Campbell University? And he said around 92, 93. So I was like, what? So what he didn't know was I got an older cousin who played at Campbell, and he was the reserve point guard at that time. So I called my cousin and asked about Darryl. My cousin didn't know who in the world I was talking about. So what he did was call another one of his teammates. And the funny thing that stood out to us, I got it on speakerphone so my other teammates can hear this. So, but the funny thing about it was, if you have played on a football team, any team you're associated with, any team that you are a member of, you're going to remember your teammates. You know what I'm saying? And I get it. Somebody might slip your mind here and there because there's just a lot of people keep up with teammates, college teammates, high school teammates. When you play for different club associations, you know, there's a lot of people, so I do get it. So anyway, my cousin called me back. Whoever this guy was, this guy played at, I think, what, 71st. Played at one of them high schools at Fayetteville, played at that high school, graduated, went off to the Air Force, played for the Air Force, then he ended up transferring to Campbell University or something like that. But it wasn't Darryl. So I forgot this guy's name, so I exposed Darryl for that. But I said that just to let you know this is what type of personnel we had on our team. And these guys was getting minutes over me, Mylon. We had a guy, Travis Sands, 6'10", guy that had to play overseas. We was all being mismanaged. And then I actually tried to, at one point in time, I was going to take some legal action. But I ended up reconciling with the owners of the team and just buried a hatchet. And I apologized to them, and because I didn't aggressively pursue legal action, but I had begun the process, and then I eventually deserted that process and made amends with the Fayetteville Flight ownership. And the Fayetteville Flight is still an ongoing team to this day in the American Basketball Association. So I know there's some still respect and some love there because they actually invited me a few years ago, but I was still playing at the time. So the owner actually emailed me and called me about returning as a coach. I said, hey man, I'd love to, but currently I'm still playing. So maybe one day when I'm retired, then I'm yours. Shout out to the Fayetteville Flight and all my teammates too, with Trina and Mike. Appreciate you guys. We should have did better, but we all talked about that and we buried that hatchet. But again, that was a lifesaver. Our schedule kept us on the road a lot. It's hard for me to remember. I want to say we played about 50 games a season, and that's including playoffs, if you get a playoff berth. So we played a significant amount of games. If I can remember correctly, we played almost like 20 home games and like 30 away games. So a lot of basketball being played. If I can remember correctly, we're playing about 4 games a week. We might have 2 home games a week, and we might have 3 away games a week, depending on how the schedule fell. So we stayed doing a lot of traveling, and that's something I had brought up the other day to a friend of mine, in and out of hotels a lot. And I said, man, I've always been blessed because playing college basketball, we did a lot of traveling, and we was in and out of a lot of hotels, in and out of a lot of restaurants. And thankfully, I've never picked up nothing from being in those environments. And playing in the ABA, Fayetteville Flight was the first team actually it was the second team, but the first team that was a summer league. So, but that wasn't a full season. So the Fayetteville Flight was the first ABA team that gave me my first ABA season. And from there, things just picked up. That's why I was very appreciative for the Fayetteville Flight. Because like I said, I could emotionally, it took my mind off of my grandmother being passed away. And that's how I dealt with her being passed away. And it also helped for me to keep my mind off of, because all of that was very fresh, open wounds, and the DWI was not far removed. So the Fayetteville Flight gave me the emotional freedom to move forward with my life and continue on my life, because actually before that, things were just uncertain. So I played only that one season with the Fayetteville Flight, and of course it was a bad taste in my mouth from the financial situation. I got a phone call after the Fayetteville Flight season was over with. And that's why they say you never know who's watching you, because other ABA teams, they're also scouting for talent. Players, we get moved, you know what I'm saying? So I was notified by the team owner, called a doctor. She's got a doctorate, and she's also a global ambassador. So at this time, this was around 2011, 2012, the ABA had 3 new teams who was coming to North Carolina. The Fayetteville Flight was, at that time, if I'm not mistaken, forget what their name is. They got an ABA team in Charlotte. But back then, in 2010, the Fayetteville Flight was the only ABA team in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I could be wrong, but I remember fairly we was the only team in North Carolina. So that next year, they was bringing, a lot of people don't know this, but back in the 70s, there was a team in Rocky Mount in the ABA, the American Basketball Association, called the Carolina Cougars. So they done brought the Carolina Cougars, the Jaguars, and the Cheetahs to North Carolina. 2011, 2012. Now, so the Cougars were back in Rocky Mount, the Cheetahs was in Greensboro, and then the Jaguars were in Durham. So that super excited me to return home and play as a professional in my home city. This is where things take a turn. So it was a beautiful thing, the Cheetahs, the Cougars, and the Jaguars. So going into that, the coach was pretty cool. The owner was super cool. She's a female owner, and her family, she had her family support, her daughters. So a lot of support. She was getting 3 teams off the ground at one time, so that was a beautiful thing. And it was a lot probably on her also. All 3 of those teams were her baby. So what can I say about the Carolina Jaguars? Wow. The Carolina Jaguars were a beautiful thing because they, first of all, based in Durham, and then on top of that, we're traveling and playing against other ABA teams, but we're returning to Durham. So I'm home, and I was just excited to be where my moms could see me play, my brother, my sister, close friends, all those types of things. So, but what went wrong with the Carolina Jaguars, and a lot of people don't know this, Carolina Jaguars was a very difficult time because the coach took find out, the owner and the coach had differences about the roster, okay? Now, as a player, this is out of my control. So they get their wires crossed about the roster. So it's a 15-man roster spot, okay? Only 12 dress out and travel. With that being said, 15-man roster. So the owner gave the coach the freedom and power to select 12 of the 15 players. And the owner wanted 3. All right, cool. Because everybody the coach had on the team, I think all his players he brought with him I think he was coaching at St. Aug or something like that at one point. So anyway, he brought a few players that they're known, and most coaches do that. They players follow coaches. So anyway, nobody was local. Nobody was from Durham in particular. So find out the owner had wanted some professional players on the team that was from Durham and who were available. You had a few other guys at that time, but they were out of the country, so it wasn't a broad selection of Durhamites So that could have been a heavy factor into me receiving that phone call because I was just up the highway in Fayetteville. So I was one of the 3 that the owner selected and brought to the team. I picked up on something almost immediately, just after a few practices and the deja vu thing. I felt, and I wasn't the only one, another guy too felt alienated. So of course we put our minds together. We didn't know at the time. So around Christmas time, I think the coach and who was going to half of the season, Christmas break and all types of stuff, half season. Something went on with the coach and the owner. Coach they decided to part ways. So the players went that was with the coach, almost half of what he brought to the table. It was crazy. And that's when me and the other guys who have been made to be filled from the coach and his staff, we felt like stepchildren. And it was war every day in practice. I never had no ill will towards any of my teammates because I knew it wasn't none of their doing. They were just doing what the coach was telling them to do. I'm from Durham, and I don't even think he cared. But for me, it was embarrassing doing home games because a lot of times, sometimes I didn't even dress out because he had his guys over me. All I can do is sit there in casual street clothes and be professional about it, even though that's a hurt thing. And I would talk to the coach sometimes and ask. His answer was always a political answer, which pretty much all these coaches will give you those type of a level. So we had 2 guards on our team. Clifford played at NC State. That's my homeboy. What up, Cliff? Me and Cliff, we used to battle with each other. Cliff was like a Chauncey Billups type of a point guard. He was very effective, wasn't highly athletic, but he was very effective, and he was solid, and he was consistent, and he had a nice frame on him. We both around the same size, 6'3", 6'4", so we played the same position. And so we had a lot of battles, and I loved that. And that's what kept me in it because I loved to compete against Clifford. Well, another point guard played, another good friend of mine, Shawan. Shawan was a little smaller at 6'1", lights out shooter. He could also put the ball on the floor, create. He was a good passer, disciplined, and we still good friends to this day. So Shawan is actually a head basketball coach at the high school down here. He's doing very well, winning championships at his high school that he coaches at down in Panther Creek, which is in Apex, North Carolina. So I go to coach, and at some point in time, what is it, coach? I'm just sitting over here feeling like I'm growing roots. He claimed that these guys had a bigger fan base than myself. And so that's just a political answer. I call it some bullshit. And it's like I said, it's no disrespect to either one of those guys. They just do what the coach tells them to do. But for me, it was embarrassing because I didn't get the minutes that I felt like I should have been awarded, not just because I'm from Durham, but because of my dedication. I've always been dedicated to basketball, and the way I prepare is nothing short of a profession. I've always trained with that Rocky Balboa mentality, down to the field, you know what I'm saying? Just dirty and grimy. And when any coach overlooks your work ethic, your commitment, your energy, when any coach overlooks those things, it's a hurtful thing on the inside. I tolerated it. I endured it. People don't know what you go through. People didn't know what I was going through, and a lot of people might not care. But at the end of the day, I'm just a human. So I'm going through things away from the basketball court, still dealing with those emotions. And then when you're being overlooked or undermined at your profession, something that you're extremely well at, extremely gifted at. And like I say, I was always a contributor. If I'm on a team, I contribute. I get you points. I'm going to get buckets. There's nobody that can stop me from getting those buckets. I rebound ball. I defend the ball. I assist the ball. And I've never been one of those players that have high turnover. Some players come with high turnover percentages. I never had a high turnover rate. So in other words, I'm smart with the ball. And with me, Clifford, and Shawan, our talent pretty much probably hovered in the same radius field. I can't say who was better at what. I will say I could get into the air and do things that neither one of them could do. So as far as other skill-wise, we was kind of hovering around the same skill set. But my athleticism, I would say, would set me apart from them. So like I said, I could get into the air and do things that they couldn't do above the rim player. So I wasn't just a shooter or a slasher, but I can also play above the rim and create my shot just as well, too. The Carolina Jaguars, after Coach left and some of those players had left, that opened doors for me and some other guys, and we had a good season. It was tough as the coaching staff left because half the team left. So we was wounded in a sense because our numbers had dropped off. So she had a lot on the table with trying to not just replace the coaching staff, but also acquire some players. So we won some ball games. We had a pretty good athletic team. We had some guys at the Damien 6'10" guy played at NC State. We had some guys that would go for the juggler. And we had Charles, and he out of that Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area. I want to say he had a stint with the Knicks. Never knew if he actually suited up. So we had a pretty decent team. We also made the playoffs. So this was 2 seasons in a row, 2 years in a row that I found myself in the ABA playoffs. And like the Fayetteville Flight, we went home in the first round. We came across the team. If I can remember, they was from that Gulf area also that had done put us out. So it was crazy. It's like these teams that was coming out of that Gulf Coast area, some pretty tough teams. Again, in the American Basketball Association, you got 100 teams nationwide. Some teams are stronger than the others. And I think it's like 25 that's like top ranked. And each team I was on in the ABA, we was never ranked top 25, but we always played some of those top ranked teams. And to see the level of talent from the players in the competition, you can see the difference in playing those teams against those teams and hold your own and pull off a victory. And the Fayetteville Flight, we didn't have it again because, like I said, you got half the players who were amateurs. You get some of these guys who think they could go play some rec league basketball and pick up basketball and play in the streets, and they might be pretty decent. But when you play in a structured organization, it's different. Totally different. All right. You guys who don't understand how to run offensive sets. You got guys who don't understand defensive scheme, when to be there, what to do when you get there, that type of a thing. How to rotate, how to properly rotate. Right. If you don't understand those things, that's called chinks in the armor. That's how the armor cracks. Right. So if you got 12 players and you got 6 of them who's never played in an organized environment, they don't understand defensive rotation. They don't understand offensive assignments. They don't understand those types of things. And it shows. And that's why we was getting our asses whooped. You know what I'm saying? Because these guys are in the game. And there's actually footage online. You can pull up Fayetteville Flight footage. Some of that stuff should be online. I go and watch it. It was just terrible to watch. We looked silly. We looked dumb. You know what I'm saying? Because you had a few pieces that didn't belong, and it make the whole outfit look bad. I go back and I look at that, and I was like, wow, I'm a part of that shit. And so why I had some pride all in it in the same, that was the NBA for me, the ABA. That was the NBA for me, because at that moment in time, that was the best I could do. I was off to a late start, like to come out of prison and all that. Should have been in the NBA, could have played in the NBA. But again, just making those wrong decisions early in life. That was the NBA for me. I took it serious and I trained hard, studied my craft. I never quit, not near a team. I love being a part of the Carolina Jaguars, even though it felt like every game was an uphill battle. And that's because some of those teams were strong. That's an experience that I'll always remember. Again, we was playing 40 and 50 games, so there was a lot of traveling involved. And in case anybody wondering how do we travel, so we were traveling like, I guess, what we call those school buses that be half loaf. You know, we call them like the short bus. So we had those buses, and then sometimes too we traveled in vans. It also depends on how far we was going, because those teams were sponsored. So the sponsors will provide the transportation. So like Enterprise might have been a sponsor. So Enterprise will throw us 3 15-passenger vans, and that's how we would travel. So it also depends on how we was traveling. The accommodations varied. That was a good time on the floor with the Carolina Jaguars. Again, the only time I was pretty much embarrassed about the Carolina Jaguars was being in the Durham community. Being from Durham, it's hurtful things, explaining to people who was coming out to support me. I had more people coming to those ball games than that coach knew, because it's not like they're taking a record or account of who's coming to support who. So there's a lot of people's coming on my behalf, and it's embarrassing, you know, when I run into people in the community and they're like, damn, man, why they play you like that, man? And, you know, that's embarrassing. Like I said, some people might not care, but I had to act as if that didn't bother me. I had to block those things out. For the most part, I did. It was tough, but I did. And that still led to even something better, because with all of that going on, all of these guys supposedly that had a bigger fan base or whatever the case, somebody somewhere was watching. That helped spark what was to come later, which was a few years later, about 2 years later, when the second NBA D-League team emailed me and notified me to come out, try to make a roster spot with the Springfield Armor, which is out of Massachusetts. And at that time, at the end of the season, the owner was overwhelmed. The Cheetahs, the Cougars, the Jaguars. She done tried to get 3 teams off the ground at one time. Find out she didn't know if either one of those teams were going to return. So the word was she was just going to keep one team. Okay, which team are you going to keep? She was going to go with the Jaguars. So none of that happened. And just like that, a 6-year AVA career, just like that, I thought was gone. Like it's a phone call. And this is where the next 6 years was going to be with the Bull City legacy.
This has been a Vanguard Podcast Network original. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Turnaround Podcast and follow the Turnaround Podcast on Instagram by clicking the link in the show notes. If you'd like to book Stewart Holley for a speaking engagement or to be a guest on your show, please reach out to theturnaround77@gmail.com and someone will get back to you within 48 hours. Thank you for listening.